so make sure you smile, all right? So yeah, we'll just wait a couple of minutes. But while we're doing that, I guess I can tell you, anyone who's been here before knows where the exits are. They're to the left and the right, and toilets are out to the right as well and down the track a little bit. In the event of a fire, don't follow me because I'm blind. No, in the event of a fire, they're the exits, so I'm sure we'll be able to help the elders out first. Both sides? Yep. Okay. And is there any other health and safety matters we would like to let people know about? Okay. All right. We're ready? Okay. Okay. Well, Nagambi Wallawani again, everyone. Hello, welcome. My name's Jerry Moore, and I know many, many people in the room here today, and it's really great to see you all come along to such an important event. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Aunty Ruth, who will do our welcome to country, and after that, we'll have the wonderful, now, they tried to teach me how to say it properly, but I've got an excuse because I got my tooth out yesterday. So if I mispronounce it, you women, okay, that's why. So, let me first say thank you to everybody and once again pay my respects to all our elders past, present and emerging, all of our Aboriginal people here in the room and all of our non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters who walk alongside us in the spirit of reconciliation. Thank you for coming today. We've got some really special guests and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. But for the moment, I'd like to ask Aunty Ruth Sims to come up, who is not just one of our major and important knowledge holders here in the Shoalhaven, but she's been a deadly school teacher for many, many years, and she's still teaching. So there's a good chance she might be teaching some more of your grandkids in the future. Aunty Ruth is from our community here. She's a living treasure and, like I said, one of our major knowledge holders in the Shoalhaven, and yeah, we depend a lot on her for getting knowledge about where sacred, oh there's them S words again, our sacred sites and our community people, and yeah, she's just deadly, eh? And she always has the deadliest coat on too. And if I was gay, I'd probably knock that off. There you go, Aunt.
Jerry, you might need to pull that down. Jerry, thank you very much for that wonderful welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I can do justice to after what Jerry just said. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the traditional custodians of the land on which we're now meeting. I'd like to pay my respects to my people, past and present, and acknowledge the future. We are descendants of one of the oldest race of people on the planet. And a little bit of time that I'm given, like you can always go on more. Yes, we are saltwater people. And I was brought up culturally. From the day I was brought into the world, I knew I was Koori, lived Koori, in tin shacks. But we're very privileged and blessed. I got a cousin over there, Aunty Wan's daughter, but Mummy was the eldest, and she took us to the rocks as soon as we could walk. This is a mutton fish, abalone, conchs and mussels. Go into the bush. This is a Ardenberger, different from a sarsaparilla plant. And now to break up young tea tree to make a tea tree broom, because they never had £20 to buy a millet broom. So she knew that. And we went to sleep on Gunjan stories, not Cinderella, not Goldilocks, but Gunjan stories. And these are the stories that we went to sleep on. And yes, we lived on reserves. If you had Christian people on the mission, it would be a mission. If it was a reserve, you were told by managers. Rosebery Park. My mum come from Orient Point, the dock. My dad was put in the home when his mother died, him and his two brothers, just across this river. And then this great country of ours, it takes more time than now to tell the story. If I walk away, can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? Right, we've got the Shoalhaven River. We've got Cleone Mountain to the northeast. We've got Camorra to the northwest. Two of these great mountains guard and look after our people as they come into the Shoalhaven. And as the gentleman said earlier, we're human beings. And this is not my saying, it's an Indian saying. One heart, many colours. But our people are the oldest descendants on the planet. And I sort of think, I don't write things down when I'm doing Welcome Country. And as Jerry said, I've done quite a few. Jerry, come up here. Come over here, Jerry.
I'm frightened now.
I started to think, what can I do that's a little bit different? Our people have been Christian people. Our people have been scientists, storytellers. We know this, not me saying it, scientific evidence. And I'm so privileged, all our people in this room, the non-Aboriginal people who walk the journey with us. And Aunty Pat, I'm very privileged to be here today with you, because our people, the oldest and the elders, they hold the knowledge. As someone said earlier, we're the vision, we're the keepers of the knowledge, and we need to respect our elders while we're still with us. But Jerry, you know, our culture's so much, and I've got more, I can't even think now what I'm going to say. But we live on the east coast where we've got saltwater fish, mussels, oysters, pennywinkles. You go through the bush, and here in the Shoalhaven, John, remember this when you do these interviews, we got some of the most beautiful species of birds in the country. At our doorstep, we've got kangaroos and wallabies. And I was thinking, we've got this creator, the great Miami, but you know what? In the church, I thought about this before I'd say it. Please don't take offence, but the Lord our God, when he picked the Aboriginal people to be on this earth, on Australia, Tasmania, over 60,000 years, he knew that he was putting a people on our great country that would look after it and nurture it. The damage that's been done to it in 254 years, thereabouts, you know, doesn't look. Our people have been here for thousands and thousands of years and been branded uncivilised, savages, can't hold a job. Many of us today have put paid to that. Each and every one of us plays a part. Doesn't matter how small, but we need to make sure, this is me, that our Aboriginal culture, our Aboriginal heritage, our Aboriginal history is taught in the schools today. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you who is here today, as Jerry said, walking in the footsteps with us. We can't do it alone. We can't. We're small in numbers. But united we can. And as Jerry said, around the world, people may be watching us today. So I hope we have the strength to go forward. Good luck with what we're going to discuss. And may you walk out of this door knowing a little bit more than what you came into. Thank you very much. One heart, many colours.
Thank you, Aunty Ruth. And I told you she was deadly, not just looks good, in that deadly coat. But Yeah, and I guarantee if there's anyone watching around the world, they won't be looking at the TV and say, oh, there's Dad, because I've only been to a few places. Okay. Thanks, Aunty Ruth. I am going to now call on our beautiful, beautiful Koori choir, and I'm going to have a go at saying it. It is Bumbarangs and Doolagals. Nah, nah, that's not it. That's ghosts and lizards, and they're not ghosts and lizards. Okay, I'm looking for you. Oh, Majingal Yangabana. Okay, Yanganbar. And I'm going to hand over to Charlene, who is deadly too, and and she's going to introduce the songs that they're going to play. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Wallawani and Nagambi, and thank you, Uncle Jerry, for that. We are Mujingal Yangamba, just for those who might need to practice tonight. And it is a great pleasure for us to be here and to be asked to sing in such a, beautiful company. And I must say, I'm a bit, sort of, I don't know, I see so many family members around, and I'm just so blessed and grateful. And our choir, we've come together for the last 2 years, Nellie, and we're learning language. We're learning the Durga and the Dharawal language and the colonial tongue. So it is with great pleasure that we dedicate our first song, which was one of the first songs that we actually learned, which was written by our beautiful Aunty Jeno here. And it was from the NAIDOC theme a couple of years ago, Because of Her We Can. And today we want to dedicate this to Aunty Pat and to all the other deadly aunties like Aunty Ruth that stand behind us every day. It's fantastic. And last night we had someone tell us that when they listened to us singing, it was like the grandmothers were crying with joy. And I hope you guys enjoy this today. Because of Her We Can.
Da 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 da
I'm not saying it. Thanks, everybody. And that is to all our aunties and our women here that are strong and stand behind us. And I think every one of us can connect to our mother or mother figure in our lives. So it's a really important song for us. So thanks for letting us be part of this. Our next song is Truth Telling. I don't know, I'm sort of leaning over. I probably can stand. I'm not that tall, am I? Our next song is called Truth Telling, and this is another song that was written by Aunty Jeno. And I had a little help in it as well, so I am very proud of this song. And it really is about, our stolen generations and the people who've had trauma and lived through that, and about listening and some of the joys that we have as kids and some of the things we have when we go back to be with family as well. So you'll hear some of the words about, being on the beach and brothers and sisters and walking hand in hand. And I guess, this is what this is all about, walking together. So enjoy. And this is called Truth Telling.
Yahweh.
So we've just got one more, and again, you might notice a bit of a theme here because this is for this year's NAIDOC theme, Black, Loud and Proud. So again, written by Aunty Janke. Actually, she's the star of the show today, really. What can we say? So, yeah, so enjoy. And if you know the words, and I know some of you do, and I'm going to point over there, sing along.
No dancing.
Dance if you like. We want to dance. Spirit fingers are around. Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. Let us lift up around, Yahweh like God. Gotta hear it like God, Yahweh like God. Let us walk together, hope, love, and pride. Connected to my people, this is our land. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. This is our time, our voices rise. Those that came before us, footprints of time. Let us walk together, united and right. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. This is our time, our voices rise. Those that came before us, footprints in time. Let us walk together, united and right. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. All together. Gotta hear like a mama, Yahweh like God. Thank you for having us.
One more, encore. They're going to do one more.
Oh, wait, what?
Yes. You made us feel real emotional, Charlene, talking about the grandmothers, getting emotional and hearing the voices and crying. Last time that happened to me, my grandmother was chasing me with a stick to flog me.
No. It's funny, Uncle Jerry, because when they said that to me, I was like, I never actually saw my grandmother cry, I don't think. Yeah. She was always like, that's it, cranky, cooking. Oh, so this is another beautiful song, and it's, again, written by family members. Aunty Chrissy, this time Aunty Chrissy Finney, so Aunty Ruth, it's our family genes. So Mungaranil, and it's about coming home, and it's about, when you drive back home or you're coming back home and you're on the horizon and you see that tree, that hill, that beach, that light, that you see and you know you're home. You know, we all get to that point and you just, sometimes it just brings tears to your eyes. So that's how we feel sometimes when we're coming home, and especially if you've been away for a long time. So hope you enjoy. And it is on Spotify.
Thank you, ladies. Keep an eye out for their new album. Keep an eye out for their new album. Yeah, they're top of the pops in Sassafras, Bowen Island, and St George's Basin. So. And Mogo, where they land on the MCG, the Mogo Cricket Ground. Thank you very much, ladies. They'll be back in to join us in a minute. But now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce a special guest and a friend and a mate of mine that I used to work with many years ago, back in our ATSIC days, and he was just a young pup then. He was a journalist in the communications team in ATSEC, working alongside of other wonderful people like Kirsty Parker and I can't think of some of the others, but I think that's about where you started off, AJP. And you'd probably know him better if you're an avid watcher of NITV, because he hosts The Point on NITV and has become one of our leading Aboriginal journalists throughout the whole country. And it's my pleasure to introduce John Paul Janke, and he'll then introduce the panel. And come up, JP.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll start off up here and then we'll move down there as we get the panel up. Firstly, thank you for the invitation to be part of today. It's a real honour to be selected out of so many people to come down here and help you acknowledge the anniversary of the referendum. But thank you, Aunty, for welcoming us to country, and thank you to the ladies for singing us onto country. I think both of those are such a beautiful way to experience this wonderful country. As Jerry said, I am the co-host of The Point. I'm actually the host of The Point this year. I'm also NITV and SBS's National Indigenous Affairs Editor. Last year, in the lead up to the referendum, our show, I think we travelled 48,000 kilometres, visiting as many communities as we can to talk about the upcoming referendum and the proposal for the voice to Parliament. Following the referendum, we decided to go back around this year to another 13 communities, travel some 15,000 kilometres to ask them what's happened since the referendum, what are still the issues that are burning in communities, and how they want to see their voices as part of the national conversation. So it's always an honour to be back out in community and to come to events like this. So today what we're going to do is we're going to unpack the last 12 months. What's happened in the last 12 months and where are we moving forward from the anniversary on Monday of the referendum. And to do that, we have spared no expense. We have gathered three wonderful leaders who each have advocated at a local, state, national and international level for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And they're going to join me up on the platform here in a minute. If you've got any questions, I understand there is a QR code. You can scan that and text that question in, and if we've got time at the end, we'll put that question to the... Yes, we're holding up another sheet. The other sheet, not that sheet, that was on your chairs, and we'll try and get that question to the panel. All right, let's get our panel up. I'd like to welcome one by one. Firstly, please welcome Geoff Scott. Geoff is a Wiradjuri man from Narromine in New South Wales. He has more than 30 years' experience working in Aboriginal affairs, and he's advocated and been a leader at the state and national level for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and is director of the Uluru Dialogue. Cleone, Wellington, she's a proud South Coast Wandandian, Coolangatta, Jeringa woman with bloodlines to Yatimatang and Narragaow, and she's employed with Wominda as part of their chief executive leadership team, alongside three other local Aboriginal women, and did a wonderful Women in Leadership conference down here, which put this place on the map. And to round off our panel this afternoon, please welcome Professor Pat Anderson, AO. Pat is an Illawarra woman from Northern Territory, known nationally and internationally as an advocate for the rights and the human rights and health of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Will you please put your hands together and make them welcome? All right, well, thank you for joining us. We've got about an hour to get through some conversation and dialogue, and then we'll try and get some questions in at the end. If we don't get an opportunity to answer your questions, of course, when we finish up here, there's always an opportunity to grab them and maybe have a little talk to our panellists. Thank the three of you for joining us today. We're a year on from a referendum. in fact, a year on, but it's, of course, the referendum process has started well before last October. I want to start by going back to 2017. And I want to get your thoughts on the convention at Uluru and what you were feeling when finally, after a few days of discussion and negotiation, you were able to reach a consensus with over 250 Aboriginal leaders and representatives at Uluru on the way forward. And that way forward was that invitation to the Australian nation to walk together, and then you came out and you announced the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I might get your thoughts on your feelings as you put that Uluru Statement to the nation. Pat, I'll start with you.
This journey has started pretty much not long after 1788. But this process has been about 12 years. It started with Julia Gillard. So it's a long lead-up time to getting actually to Uluru, to the centre of the continent, and it was chosen very carefully for a whole lot of symbolic reasons. And also the community there, we talked to them a whole lot of months beforehand. Geoff went out and made sure it was okay to hold the referendum, the convention there rather, sorry. And they built a ceremonial ground, took three months to build the ground. So we had to go into town, if you like, to all of this and the computers and what have you. But the ceremonial life of the convention was held at Uluru, and they hosted the local traditional country people there. So, and every day they would send into the convention, they had 2 tables right in the front, and the elders and important people in their community sat there because we were all on their country. People came from all over Australia, so it was right and proper that they made sure that we all behaved and respected each other as well as them. So it was quite a complicated process. It was probably one of the first times, well, it is the first time, that we ever had any input into a constitutional convention. We weren't included, of course, we aren't included rather in the referendum because we weren't part of those discussions that held before 1901, and nor were women, of course. So there's a long story to this, and it's a great story that after nearly a year of going around and talking to people in each of the various locations, we wanted to do more, but the budget was cut. But what happened, each of those meetings at the end of a 3-day process, elected, and they all chose to elect people to go to the convention to Uluru. And they elected, each group elected 7 people to go and represent that regional dialogue and their views and take it to the convention so they could be part of the discussion. That process was an education process. It was what's called a deliberative process. We spent 3 days talking about a whole range of things because I was part of the Referendum Council, then I was co-chair, and Megan Davis, Noel Pearce, and a whole bunch of people she was a big group. It was 16 people, a bit like herding cats. But anyhow, and we had the terms, it was under Morrison. Mr. Morrison was the Prime Minister then. And after this 12-year process, collectively, the politicians at the time, said, we've got to solve this question somehow or other. So there was 5 terms of reference, and what got lost in the whole tsunami of rubbish, that the question that we were put to, or had to put to all of those people, was how did you want to be recognised in the Constitution? That was a given. We didn't make it up at Uluru. We went around and asked Aboriginal people at all of those regional dialogues, we call them. We didn't want to use the word consultation. So we didn't even select, the Referendum Council did not even select people to go to those regional dialogues. And a local organisation was chosen mainly because they had the capacity to organise such a meeting. And we said we, meaning the Referendum Council, the only thing we said was that when you're selecting people to come, make sure there's equal numbers of men and women and young people. and then people themselves from the community selected who would go to that regional dialogue. So that's how people came to the regional dialogues. Noel, Megan and myself, we were facilitators of information. We did set the agenda because we had to go back and report on what people were saying. So we had to have a process to record all that. Each of the 5 sections of the terms of reference, we had a local convener because they also chose their own staff to facilitate the meetings. There were 5 terms of reference, as I've already said several times. There was one local person who was the convener, and there was also a Megan Davis from the New South Wales International Indigenous Law Centre, sent lawyers as well, constitutional lawyers, who sat with that group, each of those groups, as a advisor or someone to answer questions, or who could answer questions. So that's how that all happened. And then at the end, the last question put to all of the group, each regional dialogues, to elect people, 7 people from each of those meetings to be delegates for that regional dialogue and to go to Uluru. So all of those people that were there actually had been through a 3-4 day process. We'd workshopped each of those 5 terms of reference. So they came prepared, and they had spent a lot of time talking about it, and we pulled it all to pieces and what have you. So all of those elected people came to Uluru. And while we were all there anxiously waiting for people to come, we kept getting stories and photos on our phone. One of the airline companies got back to us and said, while we were arranging for people to come, stop buying single tickets. We'll give you a plane. Just get everybody to Sydney, and we'll get them there. And that's what happened. So we're getting all these stories and photographs and people, all of the pilots and all the staff driving the plane were all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, including all the cabin staff. So it was, and all of these people from all over the country were there on their way to Uluru. It was really joyous. And we were so excited because we didn't know how this was all going to come together, and they all got off the plane and people went out there to meet, and it was fun, eh? It was just really, really, really exciting. So a lot of positive energy, and we worked really hard for those few days that we were at Uluru. And just quickly, because I'm already talking too much, the Uluru Statement itself, those words and every expression and every sentiment, we heard somebody in our mob or in the group said something like that. And we recorded all of that, and that was turned into the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So this was, and the regional dialogues, they were designed by Megan, and we're all, everybody in the room, in fact there was public servants there, but we asked them to sit in another room. So there was just us and all the staff. We ran everything. So from that whole process came the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And one of the important things that people decided at the convention, that we would gift the Uluru Statement from the Heart to the Australian people. We don't trust politicians, but we trust you, because you helped us in 1967. I'm repeating what people said to Megan and I and Noel. We asked them in 67 and they said yes. And we'll ask them again and they will also say yes. So the convention was the most wonderful, amazing event. It's the first time that we've all come together, we Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to talk about such an issue that's going to affect us. So there's whole many stories, and we've got about 10 films to make. But sorry, thanks. I'm going to be quiet now, John.
You're fine, Pat. Thanks, Pat. It's a great response to get us started today. Geoff, you heard Pat there talk about that, more than a decade has gone into the development of the statement, and that was a request of all governments in the interests of constitutional reform, and there were efforts over generations towards addressing that structural reform, the justice, and in some way for First Nations people it was finding a place in our own country. What were you feeling when there was finally consensus? You've worked in Aboriginal affairs a long time. You know it takes a long time to get a consensus of Aboriginal minds on a way forward, but this is 250 leaders looking for a way forward, I think as Pat previously said, for a place in their own country. What were you feeling?
Well, I really feel it. What I was feeling from that point of view is, one, the consensus that was reached at Uluru was amazing. I mean, it came, people think it was a process was just at Uluru itself, but that was a culmination of the previous year's consultations at 12 different locations around the country, over 100, 150 people at each meeting. And the people of Uluru actually brought the messages from each of their communities. And what came out of the Uluru statement was a discussion over 3 days, and we call it deliberative, but it's one where people actually sought advice, got the advice, discussed the pros and cons of everything, and came out with the statement itself. And the statement was written at Uluru, despite what some people would like to say. And, well, one of the issues there was the first time I'd seen such consensus. The statement itself, I think, was crafted overnight by 15 people elected from the floor who had been 15 people were elected from the floor who had consensus. They went around, wrote the statement, come back next morning, read it out, and we said, oh, okay, we've got all day to try and edit this document or navigate it. And one of our elders at the time, who's not with us now, Uncle Sol, he stood up and said, we're not going to sit here with 250 people editing a document. I don't think we can better it. I'll put it on the floor. And he did. There were a few murmurs. He said, well, let's just test the floor. He stood up and put the motion, and then everyone who remained in the room, there were a couple that left. They had their own agendas, and their grandchildren will judge them. But they put it to the floor, and then everyone rose and agreed with the statement. It was a moment of coming together. And I think that was a real moment where there was a real consensus from people representing communities from around the country. A rare moment, and a moment which I think that statement, it will live on. It's a living document, one of the most important documents the country's ever put together. And I think from that point of view, I feel honoured to be in the room, let alone be involved in it. So,
Thanks, Geoff. Cleone, you weren't at the convention in 2017, but do you remember the first time that you read or you heard the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
Yeah, you actually came to Nowra, so I was at the School of Arts, and you came and presented the Uluru Statement from the Heart, allowing our community to listen and learn what it was about. And I remember clearly reading that Uluru Statement from the Heart, and a lot of the women, at Waminda, and as soon as you read it, you connected with it. And it was truth. It was truth-telling. And it was voice treaty, and truth-telling, and it was just everything that we are fighting for and continue to fight for. So for me, when I read it, it brought me to tears because it had a true meaning, and just that fire in my belly just was like, oh, this is what it is. This is what it's about, and to actually have that as a consensus, as you say, from all the different communities around the countries and all our different countries, coming together, united to have this statement that speaks on behalf of us. It was an amazing document. It still is, and still find the meaning in it and how important it is, and to keep working at it and to keep true to what it stood for, Aunty Pat, like you talked about. And I don't think it can ever lose what it first meant to me when I read it, because it speaks louder than words. The words written, I feel like I hear it. I hear my ancestors, I hear my grandmothers, everything that's written in that statement. I've heard that my whole entire life growing up, and, I've had activists and, and radicalists in my family, and it just really spoke this truth to me.
Yeah, and thank you, and there's that beautiful line in it, of course. There's that beautiful line of inviting all Australians to walk with us. Pat, it's now 12 months on since Australia voted no to constitutional recognition of First Nations people. How are you feeling?
Oh, mixed. I didn't know they were going to show all those photos of me. It's a bit embarrassing, actually. But there is one photo there where I'm sitting on a bench. It was outside the town hall in Brisbane, because it went up to Queensland, and we did. We're about a week there, and we also went to 5 polling booths. So I'd been out during the day to the various polling booths, and we got abused and people smacked our hands away, and it was just really awful. And that was at the end of the day, and we're sitting outside the town hall, and I was just reflecting on the day, and it was a really, really hard day, I have to say. So there's that expression. That was how I was feeling, and that also was how I felt. You know, we were all sitting around waiting for the vote, and you know, the nation didn't even give us an hour. They gave us 40 minutes. 40 minutes before the poll was declared, if you like, and it was bad enough, but that was just add insult to injury, to be honest. So it's been really hard, you know. It's not as if we haven't been here before. We're all around with the national land rights debate, and they said the same sort of things, you know, the lies, or if you say yes, you have to pay us blackfellas tax to use the beach. We're going to take everybody's backyard. Oh, the best one is that we're going to influence the Reserve Bank and affect the interest payments. Most of us don't even know what the bloody Reserve Bank... Sorry. You know, how we know how to do that, for goodness sake? And it just went on and on and on. It was just ridiculous. It just got really absurd. But unfortunately, that coupled with a whole lot of other things, there's a whole campaign for the first time aired itself here in Australia, and it was very successful. And it's a campaign that they use in America, and it's to create fear and division. And it worked a charm in this country.
Pat, I want to talk about that later, because I think that's some really
I'm over it
good
now.
ground.
I'm fine.
You're right. Yeah. Geoff, how are you feeling? I mean, we heard, you know, you've got decades of work going into constitutional recognition. You've got the lead up to the 2017 National Convention. You've got the Uluru Statement. You've got years then of bipartisan support, non-bipartisan support. You've got the referendum announced. You've got the date, the disappointment of the result. 12 months on, how are you feeling?
Well, I think still disappointed. I mean, we knew what the polls were saying well before the election, the referendum day came on. So we knew what it was telling us, but you hoped against hope that was wrong and you were going to get there. You had to have that focus. You had to believe. But I still believe that we'll get there. Not this time. I suppose it's how we're feeling, but now we know that we do have a solid lot of people. We have 6.2 million people that agree with us. That is not an insignificant number of people. That is a third of this whole country. We work with that. We know what the lessons were. We know what the education in front of us is. We know what the task in front of us is. We're waiting at the moment for the venom and the toxicity to disappear, but no voters' hearts are still full of hate, but they'll pass on. Yeah. And we can move on with the world.
Come on.
But I think I'm feeling now that there's a time now we've got to start coming together and forums such as these where we're sitting down saying, okay, where do we go to next? What's the next way of doing this? Where we go? That's people who understand how important that vote was and what the potential was. Yeah. There's another way of doing it. But we'll come back to it. Yeah. And that's how I feel about it. I've got sometimes people say, well, you should forgive them, but yeah, maybe. I have a saying, if you voted no, don't say hello. But that's the sort of thing we're looking at here. A lot of people are misinformed. We weren't allowed to have a misinformation legislation. That was deemed to be for the election, not for the referendum. We weren't important enough.
All right, well, let's save that for some of the legacies.
I think we're feeling now the time is right now to start talking about the future and mapping the way forward. Yeah. There are learnings there, and forums such as these where we can come together to discuss them and start agreeing on how we do it. And like the forum that's been formed here, it's indication of a path forward.
And Geoff, a lot of the commentary as we've gone around the nation talking to Aboriginal leaders and communities, there is this common thread of saying Aboriginal people know how to wait. We know how to wait. You look at the Gurindji strikes in the 60s, you know, 7, 8 years off their country. They know how to wait. So it's just another, I think, process of waiting. Cleone, I want to ask you how you're feeling, but also how are your networks feeling? You just had the big Women in Leadership conference down here. What was the discussion and what was the conversation about the referendum in that leadership conference?
Well, coming out of the referendum and the outcome, it hurt like hell. And for my generation, that's the first time we've been for a referendum, and so to get that outcome, didn't feel okay. And I remember actually going to the shop the next day, and I had my always was, always will be shirt on. I walked through, and I was looking at people, and I was thinking, did you vote no? Did you vote no? And I got angry. But what that anger has done, and for a lot of us younger people, it's turned into that fire in our belly. So for us, we're like ready and raring. We're like, come on, let's go. Let's keep going, That's the outcome that happened. But let's use this to our advantage now. Let's keep the narrative going, and let's flip the narrative, because it's always a negative and it's always a deficit. So how do we take this narrative and the 6.2 million, and let's keep working together and bringing more people along this journey. And so when talking about our conference, for us at Waminda, we never knew what the conference would bring and what it would create for our women. And so we had women from all over the country come together, and, we had a panel and we talked about this. We talked about the voice, and we talked about how to move forward and what happened and how we were feeling. And, women coming together, we heard a lot of the women say to us, this actually filled my cup up. Coming together, connecting, healing, talking, yarning, being able to share that. And again, the fire in our belly, like where to next? It was all about matriarchal ways and leadership, Aboriginal women leadership, and, taking on the baton from our ancestors. And so for me and, my sisters in the room who are with me, that's what it's about. Like, how do we get these imperfect allies to walk this journey with us? And, we're just not going to stop. You've done it for so long, Aunty Pat, and all the rest of our aunties and uncles in the room, and those that have passed away. But we're going to continue that work, because that's who we are as a people, and it's all about, resistance for us.
So when we talk about legacies, and I want to talk about the legacies of the referendum, the good and the bad legacies, for you, one of the positive outcomes of the referendum is the next generation of leaders is there and ready to move on.
Yeah, I think during that time when people were voting, and we actually had a lot of younger people say to us, "I wish I was old enough to vote, because I'd vote yes." And when you hear that, and when you look at the polls and you look at who voted yes, a lot of younger people they voted yes. It was the older generation that voted no. So for me, I take that as a positive, and for us at Waminda, that's why it's really important that we do the work with our young women, and, they're the up-and-coming leaders, and get them to continue this journey and bring, their little non-Koori friends along with them, and teach them about our ways and, how beautiful our culture is and us as a people, and how we can actually coexist. It doesn't have to be one or the other, it can be both. So for me, seeing our young ones, I think the hurtful part of that, though, too, is when you hear the young ones after the referendum going back to their schools and the racism they actually came up against, that came back to Waminda, and we were putting it to the schools, and we were saying, what are you doing? What are you doing for our kids? What are you doing to protect them? What are the conversations you're having? And there just wasn't anything that happened that was good enough anyway. So, but our kids are, they're resilient and they're strong. And so when I think about the future, we've got a strong future ahead of us, and the 6.2, I just believe that will grow, and then hopefully it will happen. It will happen.
Yeah, thank you. Geoff, you've been involved in land rights in New South Wales for many decades. The land rights marches in the 70s and 80s, big numbers of people, but they were majority of Aboriginal people marching. In the lead up to the referendum, you saw the marches around the country, the Yes marches. Huge numbers of non-Indigenous people were there marching, and they're voicing their support of yes. Is that one of the positive outcomes of the referendum for you?
I
I think so. The referendum was simply different to the land rights marches. They were about Aboriginal people actually voicing, standing up for the rights and trying to get legislation in a place. The referendum was different. It was about getting the whole of the community, the 100%, the 97% of non-Aboriginal people involved. And the number of people who came up and stood beside us was remarkable. I think on that, we should take heart in that. I mean, the phone's been pinging all day with people's messages and different things they're writing, saying what their feelings were. And there's one 62-year-old from Southport, you know, the heart of sort of, I won't call it racist, but it's Queensland. But his messages were that the referendum was a good thing. It had to happen. We now know where we stand. We now know the task in front of us. Change, real change is not easy. Real change is hard. We now know where it is. The journey's ahead of us. We're ready. Let's start now.
Pat, is one of the positive outcomes that there was an invitation given to the Australian nation, and you had this huge groundswell of support, and it was probably not like other social movements for First Nations people. It was a huge groundswell of non-Indigenous people marching, handing out leaflets, being, you know, outside shops. 6.2 million people. Is that one of the positive outcomes for you?
Yes. As Megan Davis says, we suddenly found 6.2 million friends that we didn't know we had. So, as Sarona's just very eloquently said, we build on that. We're not done. We've been doing this a really long time, so that, you know, we're going to be here. We're going to continue to be here for as long as we've already been here, over 100,000 years. So we're not done. We just have to be clever now. I think here is the answer, and by you coming out today. So we've got a long way to go, and now younger people will be able to pick up where we left off. So you won't have to go right back here to ground zero. You can pick up from the 6.2, as already been said, you know, as I said so eloquently, forward and move. And what that future might look like, I think it's bright. I think this was a good lesson, I think, for the country as well. You know, up until the first part of the year, we were getting, the vote was about well over 64% saying yes, and then we had that introduction of that campaign, which hasn't happened in Australia before, was imported, which we hadn't counted on. And in fact, we were a bit too late to realise what was happening, because we didn't have any experience of this kind of behaviour, whereas now it's okay to say whatever you want to whoever you want. So we've learned a lot, and I think we're going to move forward as it has been explained. But I just want to reassure everybody, we're not done.
The support for the statement and a voice to Parliament was as high as 60% in the lead up to the announcement of the referendum process, and then that dropped significantly around April 2023, which is, of course, when there was a loss of the bipartisan support of the statement and the voice to Parliament. So I want to talk about some of the negative legacies from the referendum. Of course, we've got to accept that not all Australians were disappointed in the outcome of the referendum. But do you think that one of the impacts, the negative impacts of the vote and the process is that we're in now, Geoff, we're in a watch this space when it comes to Indigenous affairs and seeking reform and some of that structural reform that Aboriginal people have been looking for, that we're in a bit of a watch this space now for Indigenous affairs because of the no result?
It is, I think. I think politicians have interpreted the no result from a political point of view. I mean, and Pat made the point before that the Uluru statement was actually pitched to the Australian people, not to the politicians. There's a reason for that. Politicians disappoint you every time because their focus is being elected, not actually making change. But I think there's an opportunity here with the next election result the way it was. But the people who voted no voted for no change. They don't have a positive agenda. They don't have any solutions. We have to come back with what they are now. And I think And what we experience at the moment is that no change, that hiatus. There's a lull. We're waiting for Close the Gap. We've been doing Close the Gap for 18 years. Every year we sort of, here's a report, wring our hands, shake our heads. We failed, but we'll do better next year. Every year. 18 times in a row, that's enough, I think. We've learned those lessons. No one's come up with the results of this issue. People are now talking about place-based issues. They're doing the same thing about, oh, we need a voice. And I said, oh, I've heard that before. So people are now reflecting on where we go about it, how governments do business. Some of the things we're hearing now that the voice referendum was about treaty or about truth-telling. It was not. It was about a voice in the Constitution. And just because someone keeps saying it was about welcome to country or truth-telling or treaty, sorry, to be blunt, it's called lies. It doesn't matter how many times you say a lie, it doesn't make it truth. One day a politician will learn that. And maybe some of the commentators will. So we've got to focus on those and focus on what is positive and where we go to. We continue with what we're doing now. I'm disappointed that the state governments have interpreted that and fallen back and been, well, you could call it political cowardice. They've just seen it and they said, this will affect the polls, so we're not going to do this. We need governments who have courage, commitment, conviction. We need a Labor government who has that. One day should maybe remind the Prime Minister that, yeah, he did win the election and he should govern and he should make decisions. And it's about leadership. It's not about cowering down when Peter Dutton attacks you. He's very good at attacking. They call him Dr. No for good reason.
Geoff, do you think then that we need to... Do you think that you need to remind people of what they actually went to the referendum vote for? Because you're right in saying that people are bringing into things beyond the vote of, you know, welcome to countries and treaties and truth-telling and education curriculums, you know, as a way of saying we voted no against that in October last year. Do we need to remind people that you voted for an amendment to the Constitution and that's it?
Well, there's two things. One, we should remind what we voted for. We voted for a voice in the Constitution, which is being recognised in the Constitution and having a say in matters that affect us. That's what we voted for, nothing else. The Makarrata Commission was a different agenda. And now they're making it up now that it meant something different. But I think we do remind them, and I think we have to call on our journalists and that. When these people make those statements, they're not challenged. And these things become truths when no one challenges and they let go through to the keeper and no one says, oh, they say it, the borders move on. The country's moved on. It's time that people were challenged about their misinformation. And the government's talking about a misinformation bill now. We have advance in this country. It's an American political lobby. That's called political interference, but because it's American, it's okay. I think we have to question that. But I think we have to remind them every day that what they're saying is a lie. It isn't the truth. And because you keep saying it doesn't make it the truth. I mean, I've heard a joke sometimes that when a politician lies 4 times, it becomes the truth. But these sort of things, we have to start challenging our own issues. So people need to speak up, and what is happening is people are speaking up. Yeah. And it's not just in this space, it's in our whole political economy where that is. So yes, we do need to challenge people's views, what they're saying. And the media has a role to play here. They have a responsibility, and they should be held to account as well.
And I want to talk about misinformation and mistruths and lies shortly. Cleone, do you fear that the outcome of the referendum and the 12 months since the referendum vote, that it will be used as a lack of progress towards treaty and truth-telling in the state of New South Wales or in other states, that people and governments lose that political will to make that reform that we've been asking for generations?
Oh yeah, of course it does. And you see it. Like, we work so hard to actually put our voices out there and for people to listen. And then when you have such a national outcome that's a definite no, it then brings it back to that negative thinking or that deficit thinking and saying, well, you know, even during the referendum when we as Aboriginal people had different opinions, you know, that's always used against us. You know, that, like, we live in a country that's about democracy, but us as Aboriginal people, we can't be like democratic. Like, who are we? We all have to agree. We all have to have the same opinion, which is just, it's bizarre and it's ludicrous and it's just ridiculous at the end of the day. But there definitely is that negativity out there, and the outcome of it too, like the negativity, is the status quo. Like, nothing's going to change for our people. And as much as the Closing the Gap, you know, them initiatives, they aren't happening, or there's no changes in them, but look at the statistics of our people. Like, it's shocking, it's horrible. Like, that's the negativity. That's what's going to keep happening. Our babies are going to keep getting removed. Our people are going to keep dying young and taking their own lives, and we're going to be always sick, and we're not going to have reclamation. We're not going to have self-determination, and, you know, and we're going to be the least employed people in, you know, the country, and all these horrible statistics that are on us now, and a burden on us is not our fault. But that's the outcome of this no. But in saying that too, like, I always go back to, how do we flip that now? Let's just keep coming back and flipping the narrative. But you see the negativity, and I talked about it earlier, the racism. Like, the racism just amplified. It just come to the surface, and it's just in every which way and form. I mean, even during the referendum, I seen it online, and you're seeing, you know, a lot of Aboriginal people not even wanting to put up what they're going to vote because they're worried about the impacts of that and what's the comments are going to come back from that. Like, again, like that's not okay. But that media plays a big part in this, and it has been a big part of that negative perspective on our people, and, you know, and I feel like, yeah, it's there.
Yeah, sadly, one of the legacies of the referendum, in fact, a lot of people, as we've gone around the country, have called it the child of the referendum, is the rise in racism, particularly online racism that is directed at First Nations people. The 24-hour First Nations crisis support line, 13 Yarn, reported, you know, a 40% increase in the number of calls to the servers, seeking conversations and support in the lead up to the referendum. Post-referendum, month on month, their numbers are still increasing because that online racism is still through the roof. But Cleone, I want to ask you, what are you saying in conversations with friends and your circle, your networks? Some people probably disagree with voted no. They're looking at treaty and truth-telling and saying, look, we don't need that. We voted no to that. Let's move on. What are you saying? What are you saying to them post-referendum?
I think for me, it's when we're talking about the post-referendum and the outcomes of that and how to move forward, and the conversations in our circles, especially within Wilminda, we're putting a lot of accountability on our imperfect allies. So, you know, when we talk about how we're going to make change and how we're going to get people to listen and learn and listen to the truth-telling, it is up to the non-Aboriginal people in this country to take some accountability and actually have conversations with their own family members and their own networks and their own circles. Because us as Aboriginal people, you know, when we speak, it's like, oh, here she goes again. What's she carrying on about now? You know, and there is that deficit out there about when we use our voice in different platforms. But when you have the imperfect allies come in and say, well, listen, you need to listen to her because she knows what she's talking about and this is what it is. And then they can really then support that conversation and then those discussions, and as hard as they are, like we've been doing it our whole entire existence, you know, since colonisation, so it's about time that the rest of this country takes on that accountability and those discussions and has those challenging, you know, information and whatever sharing and whatever it is. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of the work has to be put on the imperfect allies now. And it's not even about doing it on their own, it's doing it beside us, you know, while we're leading, because we've still got to lead this as Aboriginal people, because we're the ones who've got know what needs to happen. But like you said earlier, we can't do this on our own. It's impossible to do it on our own. You know, we're the smallest population, you know, 3%, so compared to the 97%. So for me, it's a no-brainer, like, let's bring the imperfect allies in, let's educate more people, let's do more truth-telling, you know, come to Wilminda's decolonisation workshops. You know, you'll learn. Well,
Pat, let's talk about allies and non-Indigenous people who voted yes and supported the statement. We've got a government now who seem to have maybe not walked away, but they're just not progressing with the Makarrata Commission and the process towards treaty and truth-telling, or they seem non-committed at this stage. Of course, you see in the media Aboriginal leaders and spokesperson saying, you know, we made a commitment to this Uluru statement, you need to honour that. But should non-Indigenous people and allies who voted yes and support the statement actually be joining the chorus, holding a government to task to say you also committed this for all of Australia as a way forward?
Our intention in the first place for this to be a people's movement, and that we could win locally at each local place. That didn't happen. It was hijacked by, you know, all these inventions in America. I think they played a really big role here. And I don't want to go on about how it went wrong or who did what to whom, but certainly that was not expected. And we really need you. We have been doing the heavy lifting to get proper reform in this country so we can be a civilised society. We have been doing this from the beginning, and we can't do it ourselves. So we are going to need those 6.2 million and everybody else. So by the time we go again to whatever the new way that we're going to go forward, we have to all be ready for it, waiting for it to happen. Not to wait at the end and say, oh my goodness, you know, Australians don't know much about civics. I mean, give me a break, you know. I just can't believe that most of Australians didn't really understand how their own system worked. I went to school in Darwin. Darwin, in those days, we had one school bus to pick up every kid at the door to take them to school, as an example of how small it was. We had a school, it was a broken old concrete floor. It was a Sydney William hut, no fans and no shoes, and we were taught civics. I remember we started it in grade 4, the second part of grade 4, and we completed it in grade 5. And now, in this 21st century, they're telling me Australians don't know anything about civics. Come on, is that true? I don't know. But anyhow, look, we've got a real lot of work to do, and I'm going to be quiet again because I've gone off.
You're all right. Just on the civics, we had some, one of our very early shows last year, in the lead up to the vote, we went to Rockhampton. And wherever we'd go, we'd do vox pops in somewhere where we talk to people about the upcoming referendum. And this was even before the question was put to the nation. And some of the responses we got back were quite alarming. You know, like I would ask people, you know, how are they going to vote? People would say, look, no, we've got to protect our constitution. Our constitution's so sacred. And I'd say, great, what are of the 128 clauses in the Constitution, what's your favourite clause? And believe it or not, some of them said, oh, the right to free speech. And even we had a couple of the right to bear arms, right? You know, so it's, you know, everyone became a constitutional expert as we went to the vote. Geoff, following on from sort of civics, but now talking about bipartisan politics. The Albanese government, post-referendum, has sort of been saying, look, the way forward is bipartisanship in politics, that we need bipartisanship when it comes to Indigenous policy and plotting a way forward. Do you think that that is actually achievable, given the outcome of the referendum?
One word answer, no. I don't think bipartisanship is going to feature very clearly in any of the politics going forward. If it required bipartisanship to do anything, then nothing would happen. The opposition's approach here is to say no to everything. And if Anthony Albanese thinks he needs bipartisanship to do anything, then he's not going to do anything at all. And I think it's actually, I mentioned the point before about political cowardism. I think that's what we're seeing here. He's seen it as unpopular. He's put it in the basket and said, I need the bipartisanship to proceed with the Makarrata Commission. That's not going to happen. I look forward to, well, we lost Linda Burney as the minister. I think she tried to do a good job and it burnt her out and affected her greatly. She was not well in that process. I wish her well for the future. We had a new minister came in, Malandiri McCarthy, and the first thing the Prime Minister did, he appointed a new minister and put her in a box. You can't talk about the Makarrata Commission. you can talk about economic development, trickle-down economics, which has always made rich people richer and poor people poorer. So I think we need to think seriously about where that's at and start challenging the government that they're here to govern, they're elected to govern, and they should do it. And I think this issue about paraphrasing it and pushing things aside is not the way to government. We have a new minister. I was looking forward to seeing 2 women senators, both representing Indigenous affairs, both from the Territory, and what to debate. And we could elevate that debate to be one of real issues and not of cheap political point scoring and scaremongering. That's not going to happen now. But there's still the opportunity. There's still time to turn. So in short, I think, no, it's not the way forward. The government's been elected to govern. We should remind them of that, and we should remind them there's ways to go forward, and people need it. And if they don't do it, we'll have another generation of kids who will wait for the future. And that's what the whole referendum was about. A better life for the children, a better life for the nation. That's still achievable.
Yep. Cleone, one of the things that you mentioned is the racism and the increase in online racism. What do you tell Aboriginal people who are experiencing online racism post-referendum? You know, it's a very, you know, in terms of mental health, Aboriginal people's mental health is affected. The way they see the cooperation and relationship with non-Indigenous people is affected. What do you tell people who experience that day-to-day racism, particularly online, but also it's now in person? And one of the things that we had Aunty Marjorie Anderson, who's the National Manager of 13 Yarn on the program, which will go to air on Tuesday, she said the thing that she really feared was that it's no longer anonymous, that racism is open and people are proud of the racism. So what do you tell Aboriginal people?
Look, it's just like how we look after ourselves. Like when I think about online and social media, is don't read the comments. You know, it's like we talk about this when it comes to Invasion Day or Australia Day, as it's called. And so, you know, don't read the comments. But it's a bit hard when it's right in your face. I mean, I remember I was online. There was this American comedian guy, and he came into Australia and he did a session and he spoke about our people. And this was after the referendum, and I was like, what the hell? I usually don't comment. But for some reason I did. And I just said, you know, I just put it to whatever I said. I said, you know, you can't come to our country, talk about our people when you don't have any knowledge of that. And you can't use us to be a part of your jokes and a laughing stock, because that's not what it is. And what happened then? There was comments straight after that brought up the referendum. And these people were challenging me about the referendum, and they were saying, oh, I guess you're, and just made these comments. Oh, yeah, I suppose you're one of the Centrelink benefits, and you go in and you get your money that, you know, you're entitled to. And it was just instant. And I hadn't even said anything about white people or, you know, but it was straight up. And it does really affect us mentally and our social and emotional well-being. You have to look after yourself. And unfortunately, you just have to close off social media. You have to have a break. There is no way around it. And especially for our young people, like their lives are on social media, you know. But then also, how can we use it? Like how can we put positive messages out there? And, you know, because there is a lot of, you know, black comedians who twist those negative narratives about us and do it in such a fantastic way. So, you know, following black pages that are led by black-owned people, you know, not following the racist and not having to put yourself out there to fight against it, because it comes to a point where you're like, is this worth my well-being? Is this worth my time? And am I going to make a change with someone online arguing comment after comment after comment? No, you're not. So it's about looking after yourself and getting off it and staying off it. And, you know, unfortunately, when we come up against racism face to face, we've got to talk about it, you know. I think that's the best thing, like in our groups, and we've got to unpack it. And, you know, it doesn't mean we have to challenge it straight then and there, but how do we learn from each other, and how do we speak back to racism? Like, I think we need to do more work around that. Like, how do we respond to someone who's just made a racist remark? But it's so hard when you're when it's about you because you become so emotional.
Is it just our responsibility, like First Nations people, to speak out, or should it be everyone's responsibility?
Definitely not. It's up to everyone else. And, perfect example is, one of our imperfect allies always talks about it. She says, when she goes through the shops and they have a blackfellow and they check their bag, and then when she's coming behind and then they don't go to check her bag, she goes, no, you got to check my bag. And they say, oh, no, check my bag. You just checked hers, so check mine. So actually putting it back to them. And, when it happens to us all the time, when we go out for lunch or something for Wominda, or we go to the cafe and we've got our imperfect allies with us, the people look straight at the white people. They don't look at us and serve us, but then what the white people do is they look away and they don't look, and they make that person talk to us. So there's so much that a non-Koori person can do to stop racism and call it out. Call it out in your families. You're going to lose family members. You're going to lose friends. But do you really want friends that are racist, that actually have hate towards people of colour? It's not okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to get on to the questions, because we've had quite a few questions come in, but I just might get sort of final concluding comments here. Geoff, are you warmed by, you said 6.2, 6.3 million people voted yes, but are you warmed that when it came to a yes vote, the majority of electorates with First Nations people in it voted yes? I think it was, of the 29 out of the 30 electorates with high First Nations numbers, 29 of them voted yes. Are you warmed by that response?
I am warmed by it. It really says we got it right. What Aboriginal First Nations people wanted was a voice. They wanted to say in matters that affect them. And they looked to the referendum as a way of doing that, as a practical, a very modest and very practical way of doing it. So I think we got it right, and that confirms that we got it right itself. What we didn't do was realise how much work there was involved in convincing the rest of Australia it was right. But people who needed the voice voted that way. I mean, I was asked the other day to identify during the campaign what meeting or what issue did you go to that confirmed you're doing the right thing. And one I talked to Pat, went to Barunga, which is the festival in the territory where all the land councils came together. They all came together and they were so passionate about the referendum because they saw this as a way of all the people who are in those communities who don't have a voice. And they said, this will finally give us a voice. We'll finally have a say in what's going on. So those sorts of things, so I do get warmed by that.
Yeah. Thanks, Geoff.
That didn't happen in my hometown.
Pat, last question to you before we get to the crowd question is, at the Gama Festival this year, the all-new leader, Jawa Yunupingu, gave a great speech where he spoke about the referendum as a fire, and the fire has burnt across the land and blackened the land, but after the fire comes the rain, and the rain creates regrowth and a refresh of the country. What do you think is that regrowth and that refresh after the fire?
The romantic in me says, of course, there's regeneration. That's what we're talking about. Sarona's talk about, I think, very well today, what's happening after the fire has gone through. The symbolism of a fire and what it means is quite profound. Another aspect of the convention, which people don't know, people actually brought gifts. Mr. Yunupingu, who was not well enough to travel, he sent about 8-10 men dancers, and they came and they danced, but they brought to everybody assembled there the gift of fire. That's a gift that they came from the top end to the centre, to all of the Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people who were assembled there. So it's very strong symbolism and a really powerful meaning, and that was a gift that he sent. The Torres Strait Islander people came with a new dance, with a new costume, and danced and kicked the dirt up to bring that as a gift to all of the people. and gifts were given to us. So there is a time, it is a time of regeneration. But can I just say one thing about racism? I agree with everything that's said, but you know, on the Monday, and with that, during that week, Megan and I started getting a lot of telephone calls from around the country. Most of our families did not send their kids to school on the Monday because it was too dangerous to send them to school, and they were kept home for different times. In one of my nephews is a teacher, and him and his wife decided to keep their children at home as well. Some keep them home for a week, 2 weeks. So I just want to impress, you know, trying to look forward is I'm finding it's good, and I know that's where we have to go. But this racism, it has to stop. We just can't keep going on with it. It's so painful. For goodness sake, stop it. We're better than this, aren't we? As a society? If we think we are, we've got a lot of work to do. And thank you all for coming, and I'm going to be...
Thank you, Pat. These are some of the questions that people have submitted, and I'm happy to open up to anyone on the panel. What should I keep in the front of my mind when trying to get through to the people who are invested in misinformation and ignorance? Geoff, what do people keep in mind when they're trying to get through to their friends or their networks or their circle who are actually invested in that misinformation and myth-truths?
I really think that people have got to take responsibility for what they say and what the issues are. And that's a personal issue, but I think what they've got to invest in here is actually challenging the misinformation and asking them to question them. You don't accept what someone says. There's stereotyping going on all the time, and people tend to view the world through their own stereotypes, but they've got to question what people are saying. The misinformation, if they really questioned it, they'll find out it's quite stupid and silly. But people like it because, for some reason, we like division. I mean, the Uluru statement was about unity. The No campaign was about division, despite what they said. And I think on some of those points, I mean, the misinformation was at times ludicrous. There was no foundation to them. So it's about people, they need to question what people say and not just accept it. And in our community, in terms of the misinformation and the lies that were going on, again, I come back to the people who actually are the guardians at sometimes of the public information, journalists, the media. They shouldn't accept lies and let them go through to the keeper unchallenged. People then believe them. People trust journalists and we trust politicians. Despite what we say, we do trust them. Well, we keep voting them in. That's called trust.
That's a really good point.
That's the issue I think we have
That's
to
a really
really
good
start
point, Geoff,
questioning the world.
Goes on to another question which is submitted, Cleone. It's what can be done better next time to ensure misinformation does not cause the public so much confusion?
That's a hard one. Look, when I think about the referendum and when I think about Uluru State from the Heart, it came from a place, like you said, Aunty, from a place of wanting to make peace and wanting to get along, be united. And it comes back to media. It's what the media put out there and what they... Sorry, say the question again. I'm losing my train of thought.
What can we done? What can be done next time?
Next time.
To combat the misinformation.
Misinformation.
Yeah.
So I like, when I think about the work that we do at Waminda, it's actually getting out there and educating people. So I feel like, you know, we talk about knowledge is power, right? So going out and actually teaching people, we get amazed at Waminda when we go out and we do decolonisation workshops. Just the amount of knowledge or people lack of knowledge about being an Aboriginal person in today's society and actually what it's like, and the lack of knowledge they actually have of the local history of what's happened to Aboriginal people in their home, which they pride themselves in being third, fourth generation. And so I feel like there needs to be more collaboration work where we go out and we do more truth telling because I feel like that's the groundwork, that's the grassroots work. That's not political. That's not going to government. That's us in our own communities learning about where you live. Like, do you know the Aboriginal people? Do you know the massacres that happened there? Do you know how colonisation began? Do you know like what happened in that building, that historical building that's heritage listed, that can't be pulled down? Like, do you know what actually happened to our people in those buildings? Do you know the truth? Because I know in our area right here, a lot of the people who live in this town don't know that. They don't know that history. You've got to actually put yourself out there to learn that. And there's no excuses now. Like, people talk about, oh, well, I didn't know that. It's like, we've got the internet now. Pull out your phone now. Like, there's no excuses. The knowledge is there. Like, it's out there. You've got to look for it, though. You've got to make a point and take accountability to say, yeah, I'm going to learn that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what we can do better next time, that groundwork.
Yeah, the information and the history is there. Of course, it's what the great Australian anthropologist Bill Stanner quoted as the great Australian silence, that there is this great silence when it comes to Aboriginal history as part of Australian history. Pat, talking about misinformation and mistruths and lies through the campaign, the Uluru Statement was decades long in the making, generations long in looking for constitutional reform and structural reform. You deliver it in 2017 as an invitation to the Australian people, and the way forward is a voice, a treaty and truth-telling. What did you feel when a prominent No campaigner labelled the Uluru Statement from the Heart a symbolic declaration of war?
This was a very conscious, a very mindful design, all the words, as I've said earlier, and it was a peace offering. It was a gift of hope. It was a gift of love, in fact. We must be the most generous people in the whole world, hey? We got to be. And for someone to say that, well, that's just ridiculous. And we all read it. Well, the person that said it must be a really sorry person to turn something like that into a declaration of war, for goodness sake. But let's not give it any
You're being very
airtime.
diplomatic, I think, there. Geoff, a question here about the recent election in the NT. There's been a push and a move now to incarcerate children as young as 10. We've seen a similar push in Queensland. Do you think that these actions, which will affect young Aboriginal people, are made more possible because of the referendum result?
I think they're made more possible because the environment is encouraged, where it's okay to actually punch down on people. What I don't understand is any politician or any people that is actually openly declaring that children are enemies that we have to actually incarcerate in jail. These are kids. These are children. They're babies. And even if someone, I don't know what fair-minded person thinks the idea of jailing a child is a good thing. The idea of actually doing that. And that worries me to the end that a politician will go to get elected. Just because people are saying that, there are ways of doing that, and I work in justice reinvestment at the moment. We're trying to do programs to keep kids out of jail. And when you hear people trying to drop the age of criminal responsibility, it is just populism at its worst. And someone's got to question their ethics, their morals and their principles and try and find one. And I think our politicians have to be questioned when they think it's okay to jail kids. But I think the environment was created by the referendum, but it's okay to lie, because no one's going to call you out. It's okay to punch down on people who are defenceless. What, a 10-year-old's going to go up and say, please don't put me in jail? I lament the future if we have politicians who think that's okay.
All right, thanks, Geoff. We're going to try and wind it up now before we hand back for your contemporary dance. Is that right? Look, this is a good question to get your final comments on.
Yeah.
The positive side of 2023 is 6 million new strong supporters, how important is it that we stick with a positive agenda? Why don't we start with you, Geoff, and we'll end up with Pat.
I think we have to stick with a realistic agenda. We have to really capitalise the fact we have identified those 6 million people and they've stood up to be counted. That, I think we have to actually then make sure that we pick up what the learnings from the referendum were. People saying they don't know. Civics, despite your comments, Pat, about it, I went to forums where people said the same thing. Please don't take away my right to bear arms. And I said, well, I'll leave the one in there which is the right to arm bears as well. But people don't do it. It's all populism. People don't take the time to think about it. I think it's because we're such a lucky country, but the great majority of our citizens don't have to worry about rights. They don't have to worry about where things come from. They worry about if they lose $20 in their pay packet, but they don't worry about their fellow Australians. And it's got to be built a country which does that.
Yeah.
Positives in it, we come to the learnings itself and work hard to start the education program. It starts in the schools, and it starts with the people whose minds are able. You made a point about the cup being full. If the cup's already full, you can't change someone's mind. That worries me about truth telling. But people should have the capacity to actually accept the fact that there's a new way of looking at things and what the truths are.
Thanks, Geoff. Cleone?
Oh, look, let's just keep pushing ahead and let's bring more people. Let's make it bigger than 6.2. Let's keep doing the truth telling. The truth telling is really important. I think, Aunty Pat, you said this earlier to us. We've got to keep going back to move forward. And going back means not sitting in that, but learning from that. And then growing from that. And then coming united and walking this journey together. Like, that's the positive of this. Like, how do we make it? And I think too, and I keep talking about decolonisation workshops because it's the space that I'm in constantly. It's like when we go into them spaces and then we put it back on people and say, this is what it is to be an Aboriginal person. And then we say, well, what's your life? How was that growing up? Did you have to teach your kids to make sure that they tell the coppers their name and don't be smart ass and sorry for swearing, don't be smart, make sure that, when you get home before the lights go down and, do you have to teach your child that? As a non-queer person, how do you teach your child? You teach your child to stand up for their rights, to talk back, because they've got that right. Our people don't. We actually have that fear of authority. So how flipping that, how do we flip this? Let's do this together. And it's not just, we're not the problem, right? The system's the problem. LAW's the problem. That's why we want to change the constitution, and that's why we want to do the voice and truth-telling and treaty. But doing it together. We need to, I was even thinking about the positive stuff that come out of this, and I feel like in my community, like us as Koori community, like we need to get together more. I see a positive with that. Let's get together, especially us younger ones, We've had a lot of positive stories from our community. A lot of our aunties and uncles and grandmothers and grandfathers, they fought so hard, they protested. Like, how do we come together now? How do we not segregate? And how do we come together so that we're strong as a people, as who we are, as we always have been, and then bringing people on that journey with us?
Thank you. Aunty Pat, I'll give you the last word. How important is it to stay positive?
Yeah, I'm going to stay positive.
You can say whatever you want.
You know what? I think it's time for us to change. It's time for us to seriously consider who we are. What do we stand for? What are our values? What do we really care about? It's time to come out from underneath everything that to find ourselves, to express Australia in the way that we want our nation to be. Not to be led by the nose, by the current sort of politician or some sort of flamboyant character or whatever is going on. The issues that affect us, we have to all stand up and take a stand on who we are. And when we vote, who are we voting for? What are our values? Are we kind, sensitive, smart, intelligent, caring people? Or are we the reverse? And I honestly believe we can do better. But we have to stop saying, I'm all right, Jack, and bugger the rest of you. That's not on anymore, and we can't continue as a civilised society unless we deal with the hard issues. Other trouble with our country is we have great difficulty in having the hard conversations. We go immediately to the different sides. There's very few places that you can sit down as an Australian and discuss what our concern. I'm sincere. Who are we? But we can lock up 10-year-old babies. You know that kids in, our mob's got to be questioned. But I've got a grandson, and I'm really scared. Like we all are. We have to make sure when that policeman asks you his name, you be polite. Be polite. So we have to turn all of this around so our kids are as safe as yours when they go out. And when boys are swaggering a bit, that's what boys do. He's not a criminal. He's not a criminal. Boys are boys. So my plea is, and my dream for the future, is that we become a civilised society.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Please continue your applause for Geoff, Cleone and Pat. Thank you for the discussion. I'll hand back to you. Thank you, Geoff.
Stay where you are. Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. I should tell you a story about one of my cousins you were talking about being polite to the police, and he gets pulled up, and the policeman says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And he says, "That's your job. You shouldn't." And he says, "Well, show me your licence." And he said, "Gee whiz, you took it off me yesterday, now you want to look at it today." Hey, thank you very much, everyone. We've got a couple of small gifts for our panellists. Cleone, where are you? Over there. So can we just, give these gifts to our wonderful panellists? Oh, I've got one too. Is that for me? No. So, look, I'd like to thank the panellists for travelling long distances. Jeffrey actually left Sydney yesterday, drove to Canberra and down here last night and to pick up Aunty Pat. And so it was an amazing effort. He took the wrong road coming back. No, but they had a good drive. So, look, there's a lot of people who put together and contributed to the Uluru dialogue, and you've heard lots about that today. Aunty Pat, thank you very much, and Geoff, and it's just really wonderful that you guys were able to make it all the way down here, and also your other person, Emily. Emily, okay. Emily's gone outside because she's got a stall out there, so if you want to buy something as you're going out, you should speak to Emily. And similarly, there's a petition out there if you wish to sign it. Just have a quick squiz, and so that's the sales pitch. We've got Well, let me tell you a little bit about SWATA first before we finish, because Shoalhaven Walking Together came out of the Uluru, or the no vote. And it now comprises over 100 members, and it's both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people who've come together because we want to work and walk together to try and see what we can do to build that foundation that we've been talking about to move forward. So if you're interested, there are some applications out there. If not, and you want to give us your email address, we could keep you informed of things that we're doing in the future. One of the fantastic things we did not long ago is we had a history talk, and a friend of ours, Michael Organ, he's here somewhere, he came and talked to our mob because he put together an extensive history about the South Coast, and it was fantastic, well attended, very informative and factual. And so that was one of the things. I mean, we had our wonderful First Nations Film Festival just recently. Julia, where are you? Julianne? Hey. Her and a group of wonderful people put together our first film festival, and that was very, very exciting and very well attended. So Nowra is a place of a lot of firsts, and it doesn't surprise me at all why other people and places around the country are looking at what we're doing post-referendum, because I think we're leading the way, and it's because of the great allyship that we've got. So I want to thank the people from the Entertainment Centre. They've been fantastic and accommodated just about everything that we wanted. Our wonderful singers, thank you very, very much. Our volunteers who were helping out today, you can't do anything these days without volunteers, so thank you very much to them. And lastly, thank you to each and every one of you who've turned up today. It once again shows what a community spirit that we have here in the Shoalhaven, and our job is to go out and infect everyone with that and get them to be as keen and as interested in finding out about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, about why they live on a certain piece of land, about all of our leaders, young and old, that are here doing great things for our community in the way of reconciliation. And it's just great that you came along today and to be a part of this. And lastly, let's thank our panel once again. Give yourselves a big clap. And Ngambie Wallawani, hope you have had a safe journey here, and I hope you have a safe journey home. And to all my family that turned up today, love yous. To all of our mob who turned up today, love yous. To every one of the people who we extended an invitation to come here today, you're too deadly. And I don't know if my dentist's still here, but He did a deadly job pulling out a tooth yesterday, and that's why I'm missing all my S's. And Aunty Ruth, thank you very much for coming along today. You're always too deadly. Meg, have I forgotten anything? I've got Meg and Lisa, who's always on my case. No? Yeah, oh yeah, of course. Meg and Lisa, who put a lot of effort into pulling this together today. Yeah. And also our mud relatives from down at Ulladulla. Mud is Milton Ulladulla, M-U, yeah, and they're part of us up here. So, Georgie, to you and everyone who's turned up from our committee today and our membership, thank you very much for all you do down that end as well. Okay, one last thing. There's a saying about, it's pretty much along the lines that you were mentioning a short while ago from old uncle who talked about the fires and stuff. Our First Nations brothers and sisters over in both Canada and America have a saying that, you know, they tried to bury us by putting us in the ground, but all they did was replant us so that we can grow another day. So I hope that's what we do, okay? Thank you very much, everyone.